The afternoon sun poured through the wide glass windows of the hotel ballroom, catching the shimmer of crystal glasses and soft gold decor. Everything gleamed, the champagne, the sequined dresses, the smiles too bright to be real. It was my 10-year high school reunion, and I had come more out of obligation than nostalgia. I told myself it would be a quick visit. A polite hello, a drink, maybe a few photographs. I didn't expect anything more. Certainly not him. When I first saw him, I didn't recognize him at all. He was standing by the open terrace doors, light spilling over his sharp jawline, his dark hair slightly tousled by the breeze. He wore a black shirt with the top button undone, sleeves rolled to his forearms. It wasn't until he turned, eyes catching mine across the room, that my heart paused, just for a moment, before remembering how to beat again. That look, steady, knowing, just a touch amused, belonged to someone far older than 22. And then it hit me. He was Ryan, my old friend Clara's son. The boy who used to sit at our kitchen counter during coffee mornings, quietly sketching in a notebook while his mother and I caught up. I remembered him being shy, soft-spoken, polite. The kind of boy who'd blush if you looked at him too long. But this man wasn't shy. He was standing there with a confidence that unsettled me. "Ms. Hale," he said when he approached, voice low, warm, touched with surprise. "Didn't expect to see you here?" His smile was small, but disarming, like a secret that hadn't decided if it wanted to be told. "Neither did I answered, keeping my tone even. "What are you doing at a high school reunion? You weren't even born when we graduated." He laughed softly, a deep, smooth sound that pulled at something in me. "Mom was supposed to come. She felt sick at the last minute. I thought I'd stop by, say hello for her. Of course. Clara, my dearest friend, who once shared everything with me. Recipes, heartbreaks, even the grief of growing older and feeling unseen. And now, her son, the boy who had barely spoken above a whisper years ago, was standing in front of me, taller, self-assured, with eyes that looked like they'd already learned too much. He asked if I'd had a drink yet, and I found myself saying yes when I meant no. The music swelled, the laughter grew louder, and somehow we ended up outside on the terrace, away from the crowd, where the sunlight hit everything with a golden sharpness. "I can't believe you're all grown up," I said, half to myself, tracing the rim of my glass with my fingertip. He smiled again. "I can't believe you remember me. How could I not? You used to draw superheroes on my grocery lists." He tilted his head, eyes glinting. "You kept them." The words made me falter. "What makes you think I did?" "Because you remember." There was something dangerously perceptive about him, the way he watched me, not with youthful bravado, but with intent. The kind of gaze that read too much, the kind that made me feel seen. He asked about my life, what I did now, where I lived, and I gave polite, measured answers. Corporate job, apartment downtown, busy days, quiet weekends. I kept it professional, detached, as if the distance would protect me. But every time I spoke, he seemed to step closer, not enough to alarm, just enough to be felt. The warmth of him, the faint scent of his cologne, cedarwood and something darker. "Do you ever miss it?" he asked suddenly. "Miss what?" Feeling like the world was just beginning. His words landed like a whisper against skin. I could have laughed it off, made a joke, told him that was a question for the young. But I didn't. I just looked at him, this man who shouldn't have been old enough to ask that. And for a moment, I forgot how to answer. I looked away first. The breeze tugged at my hair, and I tucked a strand behind my ear, grounding myself in the movement. "You shouldn't ask things like that," I said softly. He smiled, slow, deliberate. "Why not?" "Because you might not like the answer." "Try me." There it was, the spark that shouldn't exist between us, but did. It hummed in the silence between sentences, in the pauses too long to be polite. When he moved a little closer, I didn't step back. The door opened behind us, laughter spilling through, and we both turned as a group of old classmates walked out, tipsy and nostalgic. For a moment, the spell broke. I could breathe again. He offered to get me another drink. I told him I should go. "Already?" he asked. You haven't danced yet." "I don't dance at reunions." He grinned. "Then maybe you've been going to the wrong ones." His teasing was light, but underneath it, there was something else. Curiosity, challenge, something that made my pulse skip. I tried to brush it off, thanking him for the company, but he didn't let me leave so easily. "I'm glad you came," he said, his voice quiet now, serious. "I used to think about you sometimes. Wondered if you were still me." I didn't ask what he meant. Maybe he saw more than he should have, even back then. How I hid restlessness behind poise. How I smiled too perfectly for someone who didn't always feel it. "I should go," I said again, softer this time. He nodded but didn't step away. "Will I see you again?" It was meant to be harmless, a polite question, but the air between us wasn't harmless anymore. It was charged, fragile, alive, threaded with something neither of us had asked for. I hesitated, then smiled faintly, tilting my head. "You might." I left before he could say anything else, but as I walked through the lobby, his gaze followed. I could feel it, like sunlight warming the back of my neck. And when I caught my reflection in the glass doors, I realized there was color in my cheeks again. Outside, the city gleamed, streets bright, people laughing, everything alive with possibility. I took a deep breath, told myself it was nothing, told myself it would fade. But later, when I got home and slipped off my heels, I found myself thinking of his voice, his questions, the way he'd said my name, the way he hadn't looked away. And I knew, with quiet certainty, that something had shifted. This was no longer harmless. 2 weeks passed before I saw him again. I had convinced myself that night at the reunion was a flicker, a moment of misplaced nostalgia, nothing more. I had gone back to my routines, to meetings and errands, to my orderly life where everything stayed precisely where it belonged. But then he appeared again, at the art gallery downtown, of all places. A Sunday afternoon bathed in white light and glass reflections, the city humming softly outside. I was standing before a minimalist installation when I heard my name. Not Ms. Hale, but my first name, spoken low and certain. When I turned, he was there, wearing another black shirt, open just enough to hint at warmth beneath composure. Sunlight traced his jaw, his eyes alive with quiet amusement. "Do I get to say I didn't expect to see you again?" he said. "You just did." He smiled, stepping closer. "I volunteer here sometimes. The owner's a family friend." "Guess I got lucky today?" "Lucky?" I repeated. He met my gaze without hesitation. "You're here." The simplicity of it unraveled me a little. There was no hesitation, no attempt to hide the fact that he'd noticed me, wanted to speak to me, remembered everything. I tried to sound detached. "I'm just passing through." "Then let me walk with you while you pass through." There was no reason to say yes, and yet I did. We moved slowly through the exhibit, our voices low, the soft echo of footsteps our only background music. He asked questions that weren't small talk, about art, about the way time changes people, about whether I believed in second chances. He didn't speak like a boy at all. He spoke like someone who'd already decided to mean what he said. "Do you still talk to my mom?" he asked at one point. "Sometimes. Not as much as we used to." "She said you were the brave one." I raised an eyebrow. "Did she?" He nodded. "Said you were always the first to do something bold. The first to leave a job you hated. The first to move to the city. The first to cut your hair short when everyone else still wore it long." I smiled faintly. That was a lifetime ago. Maybe. Or maybe you're just pretending it was. The comment was too perceptive. Too intimate. I turned toward the next exhibit, pretending to study the photograph. A woman standing in sunlight, her eyes closed, wind tangled in her hair. He came to stand beside me. Our arms almost brushed. The air between us grew thin, bright. "What do you see in it?" he asked. "I see someone who forgot she was being watched." He looked at me, his voice quieter now. "That's what I see too." I could feel him watching me, not in the way men often do, with intention and arrogance, but with a kind of reverence that unnerved me. I wasn't used to it. I wasn't used to being looked at like that anymore. We left the gallery together. The sunlight outside was sharp, the air warm. We walked down the boulevard, the rhythm of the city moving around us, street cafes, polished windows, passing laughter. He told me about his work, just finished his design degree, taking freelance projects, thinking about leaving for another city. I listened, nodding, keeping my tone measured. But inside, something restless was waking. At a cafe corner, he stopped. "Can I buy you coffee?" "That depends," I said lightly. "Are you always this persistent?" He grinned, hands in his pockets. "Only when it matters," I let him. We sat by the window, sunlight catching the edge of his hair, his fingers wrapped around his cup. Conversation came easily and too easily. He had the kind of presence that filled silence without trying. Every word he spoke made me feel dangerously awake. And yet, beneath the ease, there was that pulse of tension, the one I had tried to bury since the reunion. When our fingers brushed, reaching for the same napkin, I froze. Just a touch, nothing deliberate, but it was enough to set the air between us vibrating. He didn't pull back. Neither did I. I drew a breath, slow, careful. "You shouldn't look at me like that," I said quietly. "How should I look at you?" "Like I'm something you want." He leaned in, voice steady. "Then what if I can't help it?" For a moment, the noise of the cafe fell away. It was just us. His voice, my pulse, sunlight across the table. I stood before I could lose composure. "I have to go." He didn't stop me, but when I looked back from the door, he was still watching. Not demanding, not pleading. Just waiting. That night, I couldn't sleep. I replayed everything. The gallery, the coffee, the way he'd said my name like it belonged somewhere warm. I told myself it was harmless again, that I was older, wiser, too composed to fall into something so foolish. But the truth was simple. He had unsettled something in me, not through touch, but through presence. The next afternoon, a message appeared on my phone. "You left before I could ask if you believe in timing." I stared at the words longer than I should have before replying. Timing has a cruel sense of humor. He sent back. Or maybe it finally got it right. That was how it began. Small messages, every few days, each one threading closer to the things we didn't say aloud. He asked about my work, my favorite places in the city, what songs I listened to when I couldn't sleep. I found myself waiting for his words, even when I pretended not to. Days blurred. Boundaries blurred with them. One evening, he sent a photo, not of himself, but of the sky over the bridge downtown, streaked with fading gold. "You'd like this light," he wrote. "I already do," I replied. We met again a week later. The same gallery, though neither of us said we'd planned it. The sun was lower this time, the light richer, the air humming with late-day warmth. He was waiting near the entrance, that undone collar, that calm certainty. "Were you hoping I'd come?" I asked. "Wasn't hoping," he said. "I just knew." We walked again, slower this time, closer. When we stopped before the same photograph, he reached out, fingers brushing a strand of my hair back, the touch light as breath. "You were right," he murmured. "She looks like she forgot she was being watched." I turned to him. The space between us had vanished. "Maybe," I said. "She wanted to be." The silence that followed was thick with the sound of everything unspoken. Desire, restraint, memory, fear. I could have stepped back. I could have said this isn't right, but I didn't. I just stood there, aware of how alive the world suddenly felt, how sharp the light was, how my heart refused to stay steady. "I keep trying to forget you," I whispered. His eyes softened. "Then stop trying." Something broke open in me then. Not surrender, not defeat, but release. I didn't kiss him. He didn't touch me again. We didn't need to. The confession had already happened. Wordless, electric, in the way we stood too close, in the way my breath trembled when he exhaled. When I left, I didn't say goodbye. I only said, "This isn't supposed to happen." And he answered, "Then let's stop pretending it hasn't." That night, I didn't feel guilt. I felt alive. Terrified, yes, but alive in a way I hadn't been for years. I sat by my window as the city lights blinked awake, remembering his eyes, his voice, the heat that never turned into touch. I realized it wasn't the risk that scared me. It was the way I already knew how it would feel if I stopped resisting. Because somewhere between caution and confession, I had already started falling. The following days passed like a film played in slow motion, too vivid, too aware, every moment steeped in the quiet electricity of what had already begun. We hadn't crossed any visible line, yet everything between us had changed. Messages became longer, words heavier, pauses more telling. He sent photographs of sunlight through his apartment window, the view from his morning walks. A song he said reminded him of me. And I, against my better judgment, began to reply. One evening, after a week of silence meant to cool things down, he texted, "I think about that moment at the gallery. You looked like you were holding your breath." I stared at the screen, fingers motionless over the keys. Then I wrote back, "Maybe I was." A few seconds later, his reply arrived. "Then maybe you should let it out." I didn't answer. But I didn't sleep either. The next morning, sunlight flooded my apartment, sharp, golden, unkind in its honesty. I stood before the mirror, brushing my hair, trying to see myself the way he might. A woman who carried her years with certainty, but whose eyes still remembered what it felt like to want without permission. I told myself it had to end. Before it became something real. Before someone got hurt. I decided to tell him that afternoon. The cafe was quiet when I arrived. A narrow space washed in late light, the air warm with roasted beans and conversation. He was already there, sitting by the window, black shirt as always, top button undone, sleeves rolled back, a picture of effortless composure. When he saw me, his expression softened, not surprise, not victory, just something gentle, familiar. "You came," he said. "I shouldn't have." He didn't argue, just waited. "I think we've let this go too far," I continued, my tone steady, though my pulse wasn't. "You're young, Ryan, and He interrupted quietly. "Don't say you're too old. You've said it before, but it's not true. Age matters. Not if you don't hide behind it." I exhaled, shaking my head. "You don't understand. People talk. Your mother," he leaned forward, voice low, firm. "This isn't about them, isn't it?" I asked. "You think the world will look at us and see what? Some fairy tale? No, they'll see scandal. Mistake. They'll see me as the woman who should have known better." He studied me, silent. Then slowly he said, "And what do you see?" I didn't answer, because what I saw was him. Sunlight catching the edge of his jaw, the steady warmth in his gaze, the quiet certainty of someone who had already chosen. And what I felt was the ache of wanting to stop pretending I hadn't. I looked away, swallowing hard. "You're reckless," I whispered, "only because you make it worth the risk." He smiled. Not cocky, not naive, just tender. It undid me. I stood. "I have to go." He reached out but didn't touch me. His voice followed softly. "You're always running when it starts to mean something." That stopped me. I turned back. "And you think meaning something makes it easier?" "No," he said. "It just makes it real." The words lingered long after I left the cafe. Days turned into a blur of denial. I threw myself into work, into the safety of schedules and deadlines. I ignored the phone. I ignored the city that suddenly felt too bright, too alive. But when I walked home one evening and saw the golden wash of sunset across the skyline, I realized I was tired of pretending that distance made things disappear. That night, I opened the messages again. Scrolled up, read everything we'd written. The words weren't just flirtation anymore. They were fragments of something deeper, something that had grown in the quiet between us. And I realized that what frightened me wasn't the judgment of others. It was that I had started to believe I could still be seen, still be desired, still be known. So I texted him. "Meet me tomorrow." "Same cafe." His answer came fast. "I'll be there." The next day, sunlight spilled through the city streets, washing the world in gold. I arrived early, nervous in a way I hadn't felt in years. When he walked in, everything stilled again. The background chatter, the clink of cups, all of it. Just the sound of him saying my name like it was a promise. "I'm not running anymore," I said before he could speak. His eyes searched mine. "Does that mean you're staying?" "It means I'm done pretending I don't want to." He smiled, but it was quiet. Not victory, not triumph, just something like relief. "Then let's stop talking about what we can't have," he said, "and start deciding what we want." I laughed softly. "You make it sound simple." "It doesn't have to be complicated," he replied. "It just has to be honest." We sat there for a long time, sunlight pouring over us, the world rushing by outside. We talked about fear, about timing, about what it meant to choose something that didn't fit into anyone else's rules. And somewhere between words and silence, my hand brushed his. He didn't move. Neither did I. It wasn't a grand declaration. It was just stillness. The kind that happens when you stop fighting yourself. When I looked up, he was watching me the way he always did. Steady, unguarded, certain. I was afraid. I admitted. Of what? Of how much I wanted this to feel easy. He smiled faintly. "Maybe that's the point. It is easy. You're the one making it hard." I shook my head, but I was smiling too. "You sound very sure of yourself." "I'm sure of you." Something inside me loosened. The fear, the restraint, the endless second-guessing. It fell away like something that had been waiting to be released. For the first time in a long while, I felt free. We didn't need to define anything. The world outside could think what it wanted. In that small cafe, in the bright afternoon light, we had chosen each other. Quietly, without fanfare, but completely. A month later, we stood together on the gallery terrace where it had all begun. The city below shimmered in full daylight, 1,000 reflections of glass and movement. He was beside me, close enough that our hands brushed as we leaned against the railing. "Do you ever think about what people would say?" I asked. "Sometimes," he admitted. "Then I remember they don't get to live our story." I smiled, eyes on the skyline. "You make it sound like we're characters in a film." "Maybe we are," he said. "Only this one ends with sunlight." I looked at him, at the calm certainty in his expression, the way the light caught his hair, the black shirt that had become a kind of signature. "You know," I murmured. "You're too young to be this poetic," he grinned. "You make it easy." We stood there a long time, saying nothing. The city moved around us, alive and indifferent. Yet for that moment, everything felt suspended. Simple, weightless, right. And I realized love didn't need to be perfect or approved. It just needed to be true. He reached for my hand, fingers intertwining gently with mine. "Are you happy?" he asked. I turned toward him, sunlight catching in my hair. "Yes," I said softly. "I think I finally am." He smiled, and in that small, quiet way, without promises or apologies, I knew it was enough. As the world glowed around us, I felt peace settle into me like sunlight through open glass. After years of running from what I feared might break me, I had found something I didn't want to escape. Love. Not loud. Not desperate, just steady, chosen, real. And for the first time in forever, I stopped holding my breath. "Tell me what you felt. Did you believe she'd let him in? If their story pulled you in, like, comment, and subscribe for more age-gap love stories full of tension, sunlight, and second chances. You and your thoughts keep these confessions alive. Drop a comment below and tell me what moment stayed with you.